that Judges is a crazy book. And in Judges, right, the premise behind Judges is that in those days, Israel had no king, everyone did as they saw fit. And so it's utter chaos in the Wild West. Right? And so the stories are disturbing. And, God is working with what he's got, essentially. And they're not the best characters. But the story is moving along. I mean, God is still moving the story along, right? Let's just do a quick little recap, if we can. Go back to the beginning in Genesis, right? God is forming a partnership with people. He's asking them to tend the garden, work with him, walk with him, be in relationship with him. They screw that up. But God doesn't give up on creation. Now there is this moment, right, with Noah and the flood where it seems like maybe God is giving up on creation, but he doesn't. He still forms a partnership with a family, right, with Noah. And what's the goal there? The goal is, hey, partner with me and let's put the world back together. Right? God is still doing the same sort of thing. And we see this with Abraham, and we see this with the nation of Israel, right? God is working with people. It doesn't go perfectly, but God still isn't giving up on the plan. God is still pushing the story along. He'll work with whoever is willing to work with, right? And so when you have something like Judges, the picture is pretty bleak, but God is still working, moving the story along. Right? Now, an interesting feature that Pastor Clayton and I were discussing in the office, I found very interesting. I have to dig into it further, okay? But he threw this thing out to me. I never noticed it before, but you read near the end of Judges in chapter 18, you read about Micah and this whole thing, and it talks about how this individual is Moses' grandson, which isn't that far removed from Moses. And so, Pastor Clayton threw out this idea, and he started to look it up and research it, and it turns out that it's not very well known, okay? But there are some scholars who have gotten behind this idea and are looking more into this concept that Judges might be going backward. Doesn't that squish your brain a little bit? So you take the really bad story at the end, right? And that happens shortly after the time of Moses. Now the timeline is not exact. So why is it covering kind of these disturbing stories the way that it is? Why does it cover this story near the end? Because it's setting you up for King Saul. Okay, that's what it's doing. This last story. So that part, like I said, it'll take a little more. It was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. I don't know what to do with it. And so we'll have to research this further. Okay? But interesting idea I wanted to throw out there anyway, just so you lose a little bit of sleep tonight. And so that'll be good. But anyway, now what you see now in between, right, in between Judges and Samuel is Ruth, the small book of Ruth, right? And what you notice is, it's this love story, right? But it's also this connection of what will be the great-grandmother or something along those lines of King David, right? And so even still, what it's doing is it's telling you that even in the time of the Judges, when everything is chaotic, God is still working. It's not all bad. There is still someone like Boaz who is trying to do the right thing. You have Ruth, right, who is a Canaanite, Moabite, sort of estranged land that they were supposed to drive out, right? God is using this story of someone who is not supposed to be part of the promise, who is now going to be directly in the line of David. Right? And so you see, even behind the scenes, God is making it work. He's bringing things together. Okay, so I don't spend a whole lot of time on Ruth. Ruth is really a hinge story. Okay, it's painting you the bleak picture in Judges and giving you that nice little bridge into Samuel, which will lead to Saul and David. Okay. Now, a bit of an intro to Samuel, author Samuel. No one's shocked by that. Date is around the 900s BC. Okay, and the theme is approaching Israel's glory days. Right, what is repeated often in Judges. In those days, Israel had no king. So now it's building to when Israel finally does get a king. Right, but it doesn't go perfectly according to plan. And you read about, again, like, it's not as if we move from Judges into 1 Samuel and everything is better. Right? Things are still pretty rough. And it's going to take a lot of, David sort of becomes the pinnacle, the height, if you will, of these glory days. They don't last long. And even when it goes to his son Solomon, it seems to quickly fall apart. So, we read about Eli, who's the priest, right, at the time. Eli's sons were scoundrels. We need to bring back the word scoundrel. Eli's sons were scoundrels that had no regard for the Lord. Now, it was the practice of the priest that whenever any of the people offered a sacrifice, the priest servant would come with a three-pronged fork in his hand while the meat was being boiled. Now, Eli, who was very old, heard about everything his sons were doing to all Israel, and how they slept with the women who served at the entrance to the tent of meeting. So you get a little picture here. First, you have this, so these priests, right, were not taking their job seriously. As we talked about, this is a big deal. Why? Well, because you are God's representative as a priest. You're the intermediary between God and the people. And what this is saying, especially with the meat part, right? There's a stipulation, right, that you leave a portion for the Lord. That's the Lord's portion. You forsake that. You don't touch that. And so when it's saying that, they are coming in with a three-pronged fork while the meat is being boiled, it's telling you they're taking the best part for themselves. And no concern for the Lord or their office. So, indifference about position. God takes this very seriously. With these priests, they were in it for the perks and the paycheck. People still are to this day. The people that Jesus had the most scathing words for were not the outsiders. It was not the people who were doing the best they could, right? It was the corrupt religious establishment. It was the high priests and those who were in charge of the temple, who were the intermediaries between God and the people. Jesus had little to no nice things to say about them. Why? Because you are screwing people's lives up. And you're screwing their relationship with God up. And you're only in it for yourself. Right? And so this goes all the way back to the Old Testament. Spiritual abuse, we read this in James chapter 3. Not many of you should become teachers, my fellow believers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. Why? Because it matters. It matters what you are telling people when it comes to their relationship with God. Now, you're not going to do this perfectly, okay, but like, it matters. And people's lives have been really screwed up by people who have been a person in authority, specifically when it comes to spirituality. There's been so much abuse. One of the guys I really like to listen to, my weekly diet podcast, his name is Mike Winger. And Mike Winger has, for the last probably year or so, been spending a lot of time calling out corruption. And people get angry at Mike Winger because, they say, hey, we're not supposed to, we're supposed to love and forgive and all these sort of things. And Mike Winger's argument is, yeah, I agree, but like these people's ministry is public ministry. They're influencing a lot of people, like thousands upon thousands. That's a big deal. And so there should be some transparency, some acknowledgement when things aren't going as they should. Why? Because these things matter. And the Bible says, look, if you're going to be a person in spiritual leadership, this matters to God. And it should be taken very seriously. Now, do you do this perfectly? No. But you shouldn't be in it for the perks and the paycheck either. Because that will lead you down a dark path. 1 Samuel chapter 8. So all the elders of Israel gathered together, came to Samuel at Ramah. They said to him, you are old. Starting off nice. You are old. Your sons do not follow your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have. Here's the motivation. But when they said, give us a king to lead us, this displeased Samuel. So he prayed to the Lord, and the Lord told him, listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king. As they have done from the day I brought them out of Egypt until this day, forsaking me and serving other gods, so they are doing to you. Now listen to them, but warn them solemnly, and let them know what the king who will reign over them will claim as his rights. But the people refused to listen to Samuel. No, they said, we want a king over us, then we will be like all the other nations, with a king to lead us and to go out before us and fight our battle. You can hear the heartbreak of God in these passages. Now, it can be a bit confusing, right? Because, in Deuteronomy, he says, when the people ask for a king, here's some regulation. Well, the people are asking for a king, and God seems upset. Right? Well, I think, this is just my opinion. My opinion is that God was wanting to establish a king for them when God wanted to do it. But what the people were demanding is, give us a king now. Give us a king now so that we can be like all the other nations around us. What's God's whole thing been as he's led them out of Egypt into the wilderness? Right? You will be for me a kingdom of priests, a holy nation, set apart. Right? I will lead you and guide you. I've led you and guided you thus far. Right? God literally has led them out of slavery in Egypt, through the wilderness, taken into the promised land. Right? But what is the motivation here? That's all well and good, God, but we just want to be like everybody else. So give us a king to lead us. I do think God would have given them a king. He seems to have said so. But the issue is one of time. Right? Demanding a king right now. We talked about this with the garden, right? One of the things with the garden, taking the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, was not just a sin because God commanded them not to, but one of timing. As in, God wasn't going to forever prohibit them from eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, but he didn't want them to eat from it right now. And so part of the sin of taking from the tree was taking it prematurely. You're not ready for this. Right? And so this seems to be what God is saying to the people. You're demanding a king to be like all the other nations. I'm trying to set you apart from the nations. And I will give you a king when I'm ready, but you're demanding it. So fine, I will give you what you want. And next we read about who they want. Now, yes, it's true that God chooses this individual, but he's choosing this individual based on what the people want, not what God wants for the people. Understand this? Okay, so there was a Benjamite. Now, this should immediately stick out to you. Because this has been, it's talked about Eli and his corrupt sons, and get to Samuel, and his sons are the same, and there's a lesson here as well with that. But you kind of get these little narrative stories, and now they're picking a king, and they're picking a Benjamite. The last story we read about in Judges involved a Benjamite. So it's kind of picking up where we left off in that dark story. Right? Okay, there was a Benjamite, a man of standing, whose name was Kish, son of Abiel, the son of Zeror, the son of Bechariah. You guys. Kish had a son named Saul, as handsome a young man as could be found anywhere in Israel. He was a head taller than anyone else. Now the donkeys belonging to Saul's father Kish were lost, and Kish said to his son Saul, "Take one of the servants with you, go and look for the donkeys." This is when we are first introduced to Saul. Now Saul, a Benjamite, ouchie, right? Going from Judges to Samuel, that would be sort of what you pick up on. That whole disturbing story takes place in Gibeah, which is the land of Benjamin. Okay?
Can you refresh our memory? Was it the one where it killed his brothers?
Yeah, so the Levite and the concubine at the end, where they go, it says they're traveling to Jerusalem, but they stop along the way, they stop in Gibeah, which belonged to the Benjamites in the land of Benjamin. And so when they stop for the night, you have the whole replay of the Sodom and Gomorrah story. But that all takes place in Benjamin, and the people who are knocking down the door are Benjamites. This sparks a whole civil war almost between them in the last few chapters. So then this king comes from this same sort of, where the civil war happened not too long ago, right in their history. The other thing about Saul is he's a donkey herder. This is where we first read about Saul. And so God seems to be playing a nice little jab at the people. Hey, you want to be a donkey? There's another word for donkey, right? You want to be a donkey? I'll give you a donkey herder. You can fill it in yourself. Did you fill it in with beats? Anyway, so there's a little funny jab there. Look, and Saul looks the part. He's a head taller than anyone else. Very handsome. Have you ever heard this said about wannabe presidents? They look like a politician. They look presidential. What do we mean by that? It means, well, they look like, they're confident, and they look like they can handshake well, smile. Looks the part. He's what the people believe they need in a king. But Saul's a wild man. God sees what's going on there. And he's clearly not ready. In fact, we read this. When he's anointed, he's going to be, right? Samuel anoints him. But then you have sort of this public declaration, okay, here's your king. So you have some time that passes there. Samuel anoints Saul, and now comes the day where we're going to officially introduce you, Saul, as the next king. Okay? Where are you? Where's Saul? Well, we read this. When Samuel had all Israel come forward by tribes, the tribe of Benjamin was taken by lot. Right? They're making a whole show of this. Right? Samuel has already anointed Saul. Right? But let's make a grand display for the people. Let's have balloons, a little pencil. Then he brought forward the tribe of Benjamin, clan by clan, and Nancy's clan was taken. Finally, Saul, son of Kish, was taken, but when they looked for him, he was not to be found. So they inquired further of the Lord, has the man come here yet? And the Lord said, yes, he has hidden himself among the supplies. Other translations will say, he's hidden himself among the baggage. He's got a lot of baggage. There's sort of a, what do you call that? Idiom? Right use of that word? Right? It's letting you know already up front, this guy's got some violence here. Right? Okay. Ran, brought him out. He stood among the people. He's a head taller than any of the others. Samuel said to all the people, do you see the man the Lord has chosen? There's no one like him among all the people. People shouted, long live the king. This is the guy we want. So God is giving them. Now, when we read God choosing David later, right, we read about all his brothers and all these sort of things, and it's sort of assumed that it can't possibly be David by his family, whatever it is, not told, right? But we get this immediate difference between Saul and David, right? God has painted this picture of Saul. Hey, I'm giving you the kind of king you want when you want him. There's going to be wild problems with him because all you're looking at is if he looks the part. God doesn't look at what people look for. Right? When the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance. The Lord looks at it. Okay? God was going to give you a king, but he was waiting for the right king. You demanded a king, so God gave you what you wanted, but it's not the kind of king that God really chose. Yes, God chose him because it's what the people wanted, but it's not the kind of king that God wanted for the people. Okay? And so, you then start comparing, when you get it from Saul to David, and you sort of compare these individuals. Now, what you see is there's massive differences, and then there's not a lot of differences. Interesting. The character study between these two is fascinating. And there's so many sermons can be developed out of it. All right, small letters.
Split it on two screens.
Okay. Some Hebrews came across the Jordan to the land of Gad to lead. Saul remained at Gilgal, and all the troops with him were quaking with fear. He waited 7 days, the time set by Samuel, but Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and Saul's men began to scatter. So he said, bring me the burnt offering, the fellowship offering. Saul offered up the burnt offerings. Just as he finished making the offering, Samuel arrived. Saul went out to greet him. What have you done? Asked Samuel. Saul replied, when I saw that the men were scattering, that you did not come at the set time, and that the Philistines were assembling at Michmash, I thought now the Philistines would come down against me at Gilgal and not sought the Lord's favor, so I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering. You've done a foolish thing, Samuel. Do not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. If he had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time, but now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart, appointed him what's interesting, right, about this story, so what's the issue here in this story? What's the issue?
Yeah, he gave the burnt offering and so forth, and that was not his position.
Yeah, so how it was, right, the prophet, the head prophet, right, the king was accountable to the prophet. And so the prophet would come and offer a burnt offering, a sacrifice on behalf of the king and the things that his army was going to do as a sort of blessing by God. All right, about the things that are. So you had to wait for the prophet in order to do these things because that's your approval by God. Right? And so Samuel tells him 7 days. It seems like that 7-day marker had kind of come and gone. So, okay, so Samuel didn't come exactly when he said he would. But what's the issue? Again, waiting on the Lord. You're refusing to wait on the Lord. And you're seeing your men get frustrated and they're walking away. And so what do you do now? You now take matters into your own hands. And what I find really interesting is it ends with this number. They numbered about 600. Why do I think it says that? Well, because there's another story in Judges, which if it's interesting, if Samuel happens to be the author of Judges, it's a possibility, right? Then he's putting these stories in there, the stories that they would have known, the Israelites would have been familiar with. What story is there of God dismantling, lowering an army in order to accomplish his purposes? Gideon. And how many did Gideon have? 300. Saul has double the number. And he's freaking out. He's freaking out, right? Oh, the men are getting restless. And we're going to lose. We're going to lose. We can't lose. And so I'm going to take matters into my own hands. And okay, maybe we can do it with 600. But if you waited on the Lord, Saul, you could have done it with half that. God has already done it. So it's painting a picture for you of Saul, who, wildly insecure, he is motivated by what people think and sort of the temperature in the room, if you will, right? He sees people starting to get frustrated, walk away instead of trusting, waiting upon the Lord. He takes matters into his own hands, right? And so you see sort of these things come out. There's another time where you are reminded eerily of another story from Judges. See which one this makes you think. Now the Israelites were in distress that day because Saul had bound the people under an oath, saying, "Cursed be anyone who eats food before evening comes, before I have avenged myself on my enemies." So none of the troops tasted food. But what you read about this, right, is that his son Jonathan is not aware of this vow that his father has made, and so he eats some honey, and Saul then says, all right, he's got to die. And it's his own army who says, no, Saul, we can figure this out. He doesn't have to die. What does this remind you? Jephthah makes a vow to the Lord, a vow that God never asked for. Saul makes a vow, something God never asked for. Hey, none of you guys are going to eat until I've avenged myself of my enemies. Also, reminds you of Samson. Right? So it's like Samuel is tying in a bunch of these stories that we've now become familiar with through Judges and saying, Saul's like the epitome of all of these things.
He lacked faith, and he also did not have a relationship with God.
Yes, his relationship with God was super,
Very selfish.
right? As long as I'm getting what I want. Now, there's a story, right, where Saul is on a campaign and he's asked to eliminate everything, right? Cleansing the land completely. And he doesn't do this. He sets apart some of the best. And what he says is, we're going to offer it to the Lord. But Samuel replied, does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice. To heed is better than the fat of rams. For rebellion is like the sin of divination, and arrogance like the evil of idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as. So you get this constant back and forth. Saul, who's like, just an idiot. Yes, I think that Saul is wildly insecure. And I think he remains insecure his whole life. And again, what I see so much in Saul's life throughout is this refusal to really wait on to really wait on God. And what I mean by that is like the moment the pressure hits at all, he's out. Irrational decisions, just whatever it takes to keep my power and popularity. And here's the thing, like, I see this a lot with ministry leaders who have these big followings. They will do whatever it takes to keep their power, to their detriment. I mean, and it's, and so you see these things with Saul. I mean, this is like, when people say the Bible's not relevant, I'm like, you're missing what the Bible is saying. You're missing the stories. Do you not know someone who is so bent on power and popularity and influence that will do whatever it takes to keep that power and popularity and influence? That's Saul. And it leads to his demise, as it does lead to pretty much everyone's demise who tries to hang on to these things so tightly without waiting upon them. Was David perfect? Absolutely not. He had some loyal failures. Loyal failures. In many ways, he did things that seemed worse than Saul. But David had an awareness, an understanding. He grasped something about God, and he took it to heart. And there were moments in David's life where he could let go of the throne. You know, maybe not, he wasn't happy about it, right? But there were moments in David's life where he could let it go. Where, as you see with Saul, he's hanging on to it so tightly because it becomes his only form of identity. If I don't have this, I don't have him. All the while, God uses the things in David's life to make David. The chaos, the stresses, and God could do the same thing in Saul if he was willing.
He wasn't repentant. David was very repentant.
Yeah, he wasn't repentant. What you read after this story is his right-hand man goes in and wipes out a whole town of priests. He's angry that things didn't go. He's called out by a prophet, and he then wipes out a whole town. Whereas, again, David, called out by a prophet, so you are definitely supposed to compare these. And there are moments where, again, right, like David is a troubling character in many ways. I mean, I don't know how I feel about David. But he is clearly different than Saul in his response. And that seemed to be what God exactly. What does it mean to be a man after God's heart? Does it mean you do everything? Does it mean all your relationships are stellar? No, because David's were awful. He doesn't seem like a great father to me. He makes some really, like, I haven't cheated on my wife and murdered someone. So, I seem to be doing better than David. Right? But, anyway, you get. So, this will continue to pop up. Now, there's this book. I really like this book. It's called Prototype, but I have to warn you, it's an old book now, and the author is kind of crazy. He's kind of gone off the deep end, and I don't really know where this guy's at with his relationship with God. But about 15 years ago, he wrote a great book. And he has this part where he's writing about Saul and David. I think it's really good. So let me read it to you. I don't believe that David was uniquely loved by God, only that he uniquely grasped his beloved. To see the difference that makes, all we have to do is take a cursory look at his counterpart and predecessor, King Saul. Like David, Saul was king over Israel, and like David, he had powerful experiences of the presence of God. There are moments when God ecstatically seized Saul and spoke through him. Saul, like David, did some terribly wrong things, but he was certainly no worse than David. I'm convinced that the essential difference between David and Saul is that David grasped the love of God in a way that Saul never could, or at least never did. I believe David's years of obscurity enabled him to receive a revelation of his belovedness in a way that Saul never could. Amid the legion of voices from which he drew his own fractured sense of identity. Through all the worst moments of David's life, it was his intrinsic grasp of God's love that ultimately set him apart. It turns out that knowing how loved we are by God makes all the difference in the kind of people we will become. Now, to be fair, I'm a Saul sympathizer. As one who stands 6'5", I can relate to Saul, who stood head and shoulders above everyone else. More deeply, though, it has always been difficult for me to understand where exactly Saul went wrong. The language in the text is enigmatic and raises more questions than it answers. There's one part of the Saul narrative that seems clear to me. Saul's ultimate failure was deeply connected to his popularity. The most pronounced characteristic of Saul's early life compared to David's was that he was always celebrated by people. He was the people's champion, an attractive man accustomed to the accolades of the crowds. He didn't have a legion of demons, but one of adoring fans who sang about his valor and success. Oddly enough, the legion who affirmed Saul turned out to be as dangerous as the legion who afflicted the demoniac in Mark's gospel. When the voices stopped singing for him, we see how addicted Saul was to the praise of the crowd. When David slew Goliath, the people started singing a new song. Saul has killed his thousands and David his 10,000. When that song became the #1 hit, Saul couldn't handle it. In our vernacular, he was jealous that David had more followers on Twitter than he did. Saul became afraid of losing his status, afraid of losing his influence, afraid of David's popularity, afraid of the future. Fear snapped Saul in two, and from that point forward, he went as mad as the man known as the king. And so, yeah, the part that really sticks with me there is Saul's ultimate failure was deeply connected to his how well known they are. And the problem, of course, with that is you will do whatever it takes to keep that. And God doesn't seem all that interested. I mean, it seems, David was certainly popular. But there are moments where David wasn't. And yet God was still there. And God was still working. And God was still moving. Right? Because David was allowing God to define him by other things. And so the question, I think, for us as followers of Jesus, how are we defining our success in following Jesus? If we feel like we need a crowd, we need influence, we need people to like us, or all these sorts of things. These can be Saul traps, right? Which ultimately is not what God's after. Now we read this story, okay? You probably are aware of it, David and Goliath, okay? But I wonder if you have ever noticed these things about this story before, okay? So, a champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. His height was 6 cubits in span. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand, approached the Philistine. Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over, saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with milk, and handsome, and despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds and wild animals." As the Philistine was close to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag, taking out a stone, he slung it, struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead. He fell face down on the ground. The David and Goliath story we all pretty much are familiar with, but there's some details in here that are telling. Okay, so now 40 days, right? It says that Goliath is making his taunts, right? This is the thing that gets David riled up, right? Is that this Philistine is just insulting God, and nobody's doing anything about it, right? And the person who should be doing something about it is actually Saul. Now, Saul, we know, was from Benjamin. We read this about Benjamin. Among all these soldiers, there were 700 select troops who were left-handed, each of whom could sling a stone at a hare and not miss. In other words, the Benjamites' specialty was slinging stones. And you could bet the tallest one of the bunch, the most soldierly, would have known how to sling a stone. He's the one qualified to do it. And he's not doing it. This is all the way back in Judges that gives you this. Right? And the fact that this shepherd boy, right, is coming with the sling is directly, it's one of those details. If you know, you know, right? Saul was perfectly qualified and capable of doing this, yet he refuses. David does it with the very instrument that Saul most likely was an expert. Okay, there's one detail. Other details. This is an underdog story, really. I mean, it's like the most famous underdog story of all. People still use it all the time, but is it really, as we look at some of the details? Now, I'm getting this from Malcolm Gladwell. Malcolm Gladwell, he's an author, podcaster, speaker, very intelligent guy. He did a TED Talk on David and Goliath. It's about 15 minutes long. If you're interested, you can check it out on YouTube, and he goes through these details. So this is coming from him, not me, but I thought it was super interesting. So, if you look at the descriptions of Goliath, what do we know about Goliath? Well, he's huge! Right? 6 cubits in a span, or whatever that is. That means he's 9 foot 6 inches. 9 feet. Jesus. That's a big pole. Now, what it said back in that story, right, is his attendant was going ahead of him. Okay? Again, all right, fine. You notice some little details about the story. What is David coming at Goliath with?
Sling
A
and,
sling
and a staff.
and a staff. Yeah. But what Goliath says is what? You're coming at me with sticks. Now, the sling was not one of those triangular sticks, okay? The sling was just a leather strap, right? It's possible that what Goliath is saying is 2 staffs. Right? For eyesight, now, why do I point this out? David and his sling, well, David is an expert in this sling, right? Shepherds were good at this. And an expert slingsman could sling it faster than an MLB pitcher throws a pitch. Fastest pitch is like 106.
Yep.
This would have the impact of a 45 caliber depending on distance. And what it says, right, is that it sinks into his skull. Sinks into his skull. Now, all these sort of details will tell you that, Andre the Giant had something similar, in which there's this disease, right, in the what do you call it, Guinness Book of World Records, world's tallest man, right? I forget his name, but same sort of things happen with this abnormality, right? You have double vision, you have poor eyesight, which tells you why Goliath needed to be led by an attendant. Right? He's telling David, hey, come closer. As probably because he couldn't see him very well. It's most likely the reason. Abnormally tall, right? And it says the stone sinks into his forehead. Well, this thing would cause a tumor on the frontal cortex of the brain that would kind of be sticking out. So it's possible that's the thing that David hits, is the tumor, which then sends him right down. Yeah. Yeah. And so, again, a lot of these details just read over, but it's telling you that Goliath, though freakishly tall and intimidating, really was not.
Close
Really
on the hand.
wasn't. Yeah, I mean, look, you see a 9'6" tall guy. I mean, you see a 9'6" guy. I ain't fighting that guy, right? But that's all he was. He was just a big guy. Couldn't see very well, and had a weak spot, like the Death Star.
Isn't,
In verse 4, they say that he was a champion. And if he's a champion, it wouldn't inference that he had a poor eyesight. He was a champion,
Yeah,
that he's destroyed a lot of people.
yeah. No,
So
I understand. He's a warrior, and there's no doubt he won some battle. Right? I mean,
hand to hand up close.
the guy's still huge.
Yeah, and he was probably flailing the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no doubt he was victorious in hand-to-hand combat. Right? But that's sort of what Goliath is thinking that's going to happen between him and David, is this sort of sword fight. Which Goliath would win. Close up. Right? And I'm sure has won a lot close up. But not so much farther. So here's some of the lessons there. Your giants may not be as intimidating as the whole reason Saul isn't going out there is because this 9 feet 6 inches.
Well, he was starting to complain.
And it's pretty comfortable in my tent. Right? God has equipped you with everything you need to break those giants. So, David was not aware that what would get him into the place he needed to be was defeating this giant. But it was his shepherding all of those years, working that sling, that gave him the ability to do so. You know, David, before he faces Goliath, right, he says, look, I faced a bear, I faced a lion, when I see, you know, God, along the way, was preparing David to be David, with all of these sort of menial things along the way. That seems to be what he does with Moses, seems to be what he did with Joseph. It seems to be the way God works. I mean, even when he's leading the people out of Egypt into the wilderness, he says, I'm going to take you the long way so that I can prepare you for the people you will face in the promised land.
When we go through our trials and our tests as we're growing up, we're being prepared for such a time as this. There's a purpose in all of it.
Yes. God uses all things for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. It doesn't mean everything that happens is good.
No.
It means that God uses all things for good and all of them. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, for God has not given you a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. Okay. So we'll take about 3 minutes and then we'll dive into the
Oh,
Okay, 2 Corinthians, let's see. Not out a lot of time here, but let's see where we get. What I received, I passed on to you in first importance, that Christ died for our sins, according to the Scriptures. He was buried, he was raised on the third day, according to the Scriptures. They appeared to Cephas and to the 12. After that, he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers and sisters at the same time, most of whom are still living, but some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, and to all the apostles. Last of all, he appeared to me also, as to one abnormally born. Now, when Paul's saying all these things happen according to the Scriptures, he's talking about what we call the Old Testament. Right? These fulfilled prophecy. And then saying he appeared to the disciples, right? And 500 others who are still living. In other words, go ask them if you want. Many of them are still alive. Okay? Go ask them about what they witnessed and saw. This is why Paul's saying this now. It says, "And Christ has not been raised. Our preaching is useless. So is your faith. If only for this life we have hope in Christ. We are of all people most to be pitied." In other words, right? If the resurrection didn't happen, if Jesus was just a good moral teacher, that's all that he was. If Jesus' whole point was to just make you a better human being for this earth, but that's it, then you shouldn't be a Christian. Because, like, why? Yeah, like, who cares? Go do whatever makes you happy. Try to win at life. Make the most money you can, and good luck. If Christ is not raised, then it doesn't matter. Or if you think that it's only to make you better for this life, then you should do something. Two sort of things. Right? Yeah.
someone could go backwards. I've
Back.
never seen it before. Abnormally born.
Yeah. Paul is saying, last of all, he appeared to me also as to one abnormally born. There is debate about what Paul means by that statement. I think taken in context, he appeared to James, then to all the apostles, and last of all, he appeared to me. In other words, Paul's saying, like, I didn't have to be included in that list. He wasn't one of the original, right? He sort of makes it by God's providence and God's providence, right? And this, I think, will be a continuing theme in Paul's life when he's living. But arguments against the resurrection. Okay, so the first big argument that Paul is making is saying Jesus really rose from the dead. This is essential. This is most important. This is the thing that Christianity itself hangs on. And so, if you can disprove the resurrection, then you can disprove Christianity. And so, people obviously have tried. Because people don't rise from the dead. But again, if someone has, then we should probably listen to that individual. What do you say? And so, let's do a little experiment if we can. I will ask one person from each table. If you have a smartphone, access to an AI thing like Google or ChatGPT or one of those, ask them, what are the strongest arguments against the resurrection? Against the resurrection. Go ahead and ask. We'll see what they come up with. Against, yeah, not supporting, against it. Let's see what the best arguments against the resurrection are. We have one back here. I'm just going to ask you for one.
Dead means dead, biological science.
What's it?
Dead means dead, biological science.
Dead means dead. Okay, so according to one, the strongest argument is that people just simply don't rise from the dead. Okay? All right, so first argument we have over here is, well, it's just, we just know that once you're dead, you don't come back to life. Okay? How about over here, Miss Carol's table? Do you have a different? He didn't actually die. What's, what do they say here? Okay, so he just passed out and came to in the tomb. Okay? Yep.
Gospel accounts were written decades later.
Decades later. Okay, gospel accounts were written decades later. All right, all right. Yep. Mass hallucination. Yep. Legend development, fisherman's tale, right? All right, so we've got a lot of these are the best arguments according to AI in our day today. Now, what you shared, right? Swoon theory, you fainted. Well, what's the problem with this idea? He fainted.
Fainted people don't get buried.
Yeah, fainted, okay. So he fainted, they said he came to in the cool of the tomb. Well, he just been beaten to death, essentially. If he came to, he'd be severely dehydrated. In fact, Dr. Fisher-Carnes, you can probably tell us how severely dehydrated, weak this individual most likely. Then, do you think that he could have then rolled away a stone, massive stone, right, multi-ton stone from inside, and then also walked past a bunch of guards who didn't want him to be alive? I think we got some problems. I think we got some problems, yeah?
He also was stuck in the side by a spear. That would wake you up.
That would wake you up.
And here's another good one.
Perhaps.
This is argument number 5. Jesus had a twin brother who looked like him and pretended to be the Messiah after the resurrection.
This is actually,
That
this
was
is,
Castro.
yeah, this is actually the belief of Muslims. Yeah, they don't believe it was his brother, they believe it was Judas, who was made to look like Jesus.
Which Judas? The one that killed
Judas
himself?
Iscariot, the one who betrayed him.
Oh, okay.
This is what Muslims believe. Here we go. Hallucination hypothesis. They had too many mushrooms on their pizza that night, and they all just, the group just imagined the whole thing. Again, what's the problem? Besides it's fairly obvious. Right? That's, they say if people reach a level of grief, you can reach a level of grief where you hallucinate. That's possible, of course, for 1, 2 people, for 11 individuals. And then you had, as Paul said, he appeared to 500 other people. This was the weekend of Passover. You had close to 1 million people in the city at that time. Right? And so when Paul's saying he appeared to over 500, Paul's saying you can ask any one of those people. So you have to deal with more than just 11, and even 11 is like, wait, so you all are hallucinating, which is doesn't happen. You're all hallucinating the same thing? Because if you're really hallucinating, if we all started tripping, we'd all have different stories to tell. Right? So that conspiracy theory, right? One of the biggest arguments is look, these people people, they just started telling a story. They weren't expecting it to take off. And it just happened to work. What's the problem? Well, again, rebuttal to you. What about the people that really didn't want this to be true? The Romans and the Jews really did not want this story to be true. It made the Romans look bad. Really bad. People lost their lives over this. It would be easy to disprove, produce a body. That's it. Right? This idea, even says in the scriptures, the Jews have this story, and they still do to this day, and it's true, they still do to this day, is that the disciples stole the body. Well, again, there was a legion of soldiers who were placed in front of the tomb. You're saying these guys who were scared out of their mind, they're hiding in the upper room, right? They go in the cover of darkness between all these soldiers. They unroll a massive tomb. They take the body out. Do you hear how absurd this is? And yes, it's true that pretty much everyone who has died has not resurrected, except a few. Perhaps we should believe that. Perhaps if it really did happen, then there's some truth. Perhaps that's something only God could do. I don't know that God could provide any other. And so, as we said, look, I had you all do the experiment. These are the best arguments. They're not good arguments. They're not good arguments. We don't want to believe that someone claiming to be God rose from the dead. Why? Because it means we'll have to take that person's word seriously. It means we'll have to actually start reading our Bible and consider what God has been saying to people since the beginning, forming this partnership with people, wanting them to say no to some things, yes to other things. It means changing aspects of our life. It means losing the popularity and influence that people like Saul so desperately want. We don't want to. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, they absolutely, there's a conspiracy to kill Lazarus. Because the story is gaining popularity. I had an idea about writing a fiction book of a guy in the Middle East who's just like, walking around and it's Lazarus. But nobody knows it's Lazarus, so he's just like telling stories of all. He's like still alive. I might write it. Just like hanging out, having a coffee with somebody. Okay. Let's see. We might be at our time here. Yeah, it's 7:58. So, let's see. No. Yeah. No, I do. Nobody really has argued about it. By and large, people don't ask you about it. It's just people generally don't know why it matters. I think, by and large, people today, it's not a question for them of whether it happened or not. I think for them, they're like, okay, even if it did, who cares? That was 2,000 years ago. Why are we still talking about it? To which my point is, because it still matters. Because it's telling you that God has been authoring the story. And that if he says he's going to come back, then he's probably going to come back. And if he says he's going to judge the world, he's probably going to judge the world. And he's probably going to use his standard to do so. So, like, what are you living for, and all of these sort of things. So that to me is the greater question. Now, when I taught in private Christian school, I divided the class up, and I had them pick one of these arguments, argue against it. Right, and we went back and forth with this. I think it matters, and I think it's good to know what the most popular arguments are, because what you can see is they're weak arguments. We shouldn't be afraid of the counter questions or arguments. So I love discussing this with people. I don't get a lot of people who ask me that. Right, well, like I said, I think for me the bigger question for most people is, okay, fine, Jesus rose from the dead, who cares? So to me, the greater question is, why should you care about it? Now, I want you to read about Paul, and I think this is how we'll wrap it up. The argument that Corinth is sort of asking Paul is like, okay, why should we listen to you? When Paul actually comes and actually speaks to us, he's not very impressive. This is sort of the verses we get that Paul probably wasn't a great speaker. He was great at writing. Paul was super smart, right? He could make phenomenal arguments. He was a great author. He wasn't very impressive in person. People were like, you kind of short. You don't speak very well. Why should we listen to you? We have these other people over here. They're very charismatic. They move around when they talk. And they connect with the audience, and they're very smart, and so we like listening to them. They're obviously chosen by God. It's interesting. We read about that with Saul, right? And we still do this today, right? When we pick our speakers that we listen to, he's so great. He just he smiles at me, he says hello. Just so nice.
Tim's hat. Tim's hat.
But Paul was a Jewish scholar, though.
Paul was extremely smart. But what the Corinthians are saying is that, you write us these letters, and these letters are smart, but when you deliver a sermon, it kind of sucks.
Not everybody can stand in front of the crowd.
Well, so Paul is making this argument. Hey, you like these super apostles. Super apostles are you like the impressive, the charismatic, the ones who are very elegant in speaking, and I don't bring that to the table, but, and this to me will be Paul's thing throughout the whole Bible, is he is trying to make his appeal that he is, in fact, called by God. I think he struggles with this himself. Called by God to do what he is doing. I believe, personally, this is Paul's thorn in the flesh. This is his, he struggles with who he is in his calling. Because for so long, he persecuted the church, right? I think he struggles when it comes to actually an elegant speaking. He's a great writer, obviously. Right? But he's constantly trying to make the argument to the Jews and the others, hey, I am called by God to do this. And people struggle to listen. Because it doesn't seem to be all that impressive. Not really. And I think Paul struggles with it. But he says with the thorn in the flesh, right? 3 times I prayed that God would take it away. And God's response to him was, my grace is sufficient for you. In other words, Paul, you and I are good. You and I are in saying and all of these sort of things, but at the end of the day, God is calling us to walk. He's using the mountains and the valleys. He's using the times of obscurity where nothing is going on, it seems like. God is using all of it. And God is just asking you to walk. Walk with me, trust me, follow me, wait on me. Wait on me. Doesn't matter what anybody else says. So that's what I see in all of that. Okay, we're done. We're not going any further. 8:05. Okay, so let's pray for one another, encourage each other. Stop praying and don't do it. Do it. You know, so I think there's like, unleash around us, these praying about God's will. We like God's will.
To me, it feels like a bank, but supposedly there's like a sign in here. It literally felt like it was about to be like exploded in my head. Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas I think like the song,
Everything is really good. It's really good word.
soul takes back hand.
But like, really,
He could have known, hey, God is asking me. So either
if you should never actually like you walk through.
or just means
I did that even after. Yeah, something happened with it.
What about the cyst on the kidney? Oh, okay, so it's no problem.
Like I go home, I'll go yeah, he
Talking about Robert? No, but I mean, try to explain what I'm saying. It's like, we're at an airport, and waiting for a plane. One of the engines is out, the other one's on fire, and the pilot is gone, and we have somebody from the passengers driving it. And we don't want to expect it, but it can crash anything. You're not doing good, especially Emiliano on the age. And they're getting, all of a sudden getting sick all the time. Yeah. try to get them, but they get sick. So. Not good. Dave, how you been? You getting take any medicine? Hey, what? Fever? surgery?